I was on my knees in the middle of my living room floor, my face buried in my hands, sobbing until I could hardly breathe. The life I once thought was secure had completely collapsed. I had no money, no peace, and I felt no strength left to fight. My marriage was in pieces, my health was failing, and my prayers felt like they were bouncing off the ceiling. I screamed into the empty room, "Jehovah, where are you? Do you even see me anymore?" That was the moment, the breaking point, that could have destroyed me. But instead, it became the turning point that made me unstoppable. Before I go any further, let me pause to appreciate every single one of you. To my loyal subscribers, thank you for always showing up and supporting this channel. To my new viewers and those returning who have not yet subscribed, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button. It is the fuel that keeps me going and keeps stories like this alive. And please, as you listen, share your thoughts in the comments below. You never know how your words might encourage someone else. Now let me take you back and tell you how it all began. My name is Rebecca. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the United States. People who saw me as a child would never have believed the pain I would one day face. I was raised in a home that looked perfect on the outside, neatly cut grass, a smiling family that showed up to gatherings, and a Bible on the coffee table. But behind closed doors, things were different. My parents' marriage was strained, and I often heard arguments muffled through the walls. Still, I grew up with a strong belief in Jehovah, nurtured by my grandmother, who was a faithful witness. She was the one who taught me how to pray, who made sure I understood scriptures like Isaiah 41 verse 10, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be anxious, for I am your God." By the time I became an adult, I thought I had life figured out. I married young, built a family, and believed that faith would shield me from hardship. But then came the struggle that would tear my world apart. It started with financial troubles. My husband's business collapsed during an economic downturn. Debt piled up, and creditors called daily. Our home was on the brink of foreclosure, and I felt humiliated walking into grocery stores, calculating every cent before I checked out. But the financial crisis was only the beginning. Soon, my marriage began to unravel under the weight of stress. My husband grew distant. We fought about money, about decisions, and eventually about everything. The man who once held my hand in Kingdom Hall now barely looked me in the eyes. And then came the hardest blow, my health. Doctors diagnosed me with an autoimmune condition that drained my strength. Some mornings, I could not even get out of bed. I watched my children, still so young, wondering if I would live long enough to see them grow. That was when the depression set in. Nights became sleepless. Days became endless cycles of worry. I went to meetings at the Kingdom Hall, but my heart was numb. I read scriptures, but they felt distant. I prayed, but my words seemed empty. One evening, after yet another argument with my husband, I collapsed on the living room floor, sobbing so loudly I thought the neighbors might hear. That was the night I cried out, "Jehovah, where are you? I cannot do this anymore." I expected silence. But what came next changed me forever. I wish I could tell you that after I cried out that night on my living room floor, everything suddenly got better. But the truth? Nothing around me changed instantly. The bills still sat unopened on the kitchen table. My husband still slept on the far edge of the bed, his back turned to me. My body still ached with pain, and my strength was still weak. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was more like a whisper in my heart. I remembered the scripture my grandmother used to quote whenever life got overwhelming: "Jehovah is near to those broken at heart, and those crushed in spirit he saves." Psalm 34 verse 18. At that moment, I realized, Jehovah was there. He had been all along. He hadn't abandoned me. I had just been too consumed by my problems to hear his voice. The next morning, with swollen eyes and a trembling heart, I opened my Bible. I wasn't looking for comfort, to be honest. I just opened it because I didn't know what else to do. My eyes landed on Isaiah 41 verse 13, "For I, Jehovah your God, am grasping your right hand, the one saying to you, do not be afraid. I will help you. Tears ran down my cheeks again, but this time, they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of hope. For the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't fighting alone. I didn't suddenly turn into a warrior of faith overnight. It started with small steps. I began praying differently. Instead of asking Jehovah to take the pain away immediately, I prayed for the strength to endure it. Instead of asking him to fix my marriage instantly, I prayed for the wisdom to show patience and kindness, even when my husband seemed distant. And slowly, I noticed changes, not in the circumstances, but in me. When creditors called, I didn't burst into tears anymore. I calmly explained our situation, and sometimes they gave us extensions. When my health flared up, I didn't sink into despair as deeply. I whispered prayers under my breath, asking Jehovah to give me just enough strength for that day. And when my husband came home late or snapped in frustration, I chose silence over fighting, asking Jehovah to help me show respect even when it felt undeserved. It wasn't easy. In fact, some days I wanted to give up all over again. But here's what I learned: Jehovah doesn't always remove the storm. Sometimes, he teaches you how to walk through it without drowning. One evening, I almost skipped the meeting at the Kingdom Hall. I was exhausted, my body hurt, and my heart felt heavy. But something nudged me to go. That night, the talk was on endurance. The brother quoted James 1 verses 2-4, "Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you meet with various trials, knowing that this tested quality of your faith produces endurance." I sat in that seat, my hands trembling, because it felt as if Jehovah had written that talk just for me. Endurance. That was the word. My struggles weren't proof that Jehovah had abandoned me. They were opportunities to develop endurance, to grow stronger, to become unstoppable through his strength. On the way home, my husband noticed tears in my eyes. For the first time in months, he asked softly, "Are you okay?" And though things weren't magically healed, that small question felt like a crack in the wall that had grown between us. It was around this time that my grandmother, the very one who had planted seeds of faith in me as a child, fell ill. She had always been the rock in our family, the one who reminded us of Jehovah's promises. Watching her grow weaker broke my heart. One afternoon, I sat by her hospital bed, holding her frail hand. "Grandma," I whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep going." She opened her eyes, weak but clear, and said, "Rebecca, strength doesn't come from us. It comes from Jehovah. If you lean on yourself, you'll break. But if you lean on him, you'll rise." That moment stayed with me. Her words were like fire in my chest. Days later, when she passed away, I thought I would collapse again under grief. But instead, I felt something else: resolve. If she could live her whole life trusting Jehovah, even in weakness, then so could I. Slowly, things began to shift. My husband and I started counseling with elders, who gently reminded us of Jehovah's principles for marriage. We didn't fix everything overnight, but for the first time, we were on the same side instead of fighting each other. Financially, it was still rough. But little by little, Jehovah provided unexpected job opportunities, small blessings that kept us afloat, friends who quietly slipped us groceries or gas money. And through it all, I felt my faith growing deeper than it had ever been before. The struggles hadn't disappeared. But they were no longer crushing me. Instead, they were shaping me. Teaching me endurance. Making me unstoppable, not because I was strong, but because Jehovah's strength was carrying me. The day I realized I was not the same woman anymore came in the most ordinary way. It was a cold morning in January. My husband and I had just argued the night before about money again, and I woke up with that familiar knot in my stomach. But instead of letting fear choke me, I sat at the edge of the bed, whispered a prayer, and opened my Bible. My eyes landed on Philippians 4 verse 13. "For all things I have the strength through the one who gives me power." Something inside me clicked. For so long, I had looked at my struggles as signs of weakness, as evidence that I was failing. But that morning, I realized, they were my training ground. Every tear, every argument, every bill that looked impossible to pay, every doctor's report that threatened to break me, it was all building me into someone who could rise above pain instead of crumbling under it. I started walking differently. Not in arrogance, but in quiet confidence. When I got another medical diagnosis that would have crushed me months earlier, I reminded myself, Jehovah already knew about this before the doctor spoke. If he allowed it, then he would give me the strength to endure it. When my husband lashed out one evening in frustration, instead of shouting back, I took a deep breath and asked Jehovah to help me respond with love. To my surprise, my calm response diffused the tension. He looked at me differently that night, almost as if he wondered where this new strength was coming from. And financially, though the numbers still didn't make sense, I stopped living in fear. Each time I prayed over our situation, I saw small ways Jehovah was providing. I began to see our survival as proof that his hand was carrying us. It was as though the very things that once crushed me had now become proof of Jehovah's faithfulness. One week, the elders asked me to share an encouraging experience during the congregation meeting. I almost said no. The old me would have been too embarrassed, too afraid of being judged for struggling so much. But then I remembered Isaiah 40 verse 29, He gives power to the tired one and full might to those lacking strength. So I stood in front of my congregation and told the truth. I shared how I had nearly given up. I told them how my marriage had felt like it was falling apart, how my health had made me feel useless, how the bills had crushed me. And then I told them about the whisper of Jehovah's promise that saved me. As I spoke, I saw tears in the eyes of some sisters. After the meeting, a young sister hugged me and whispered, I was about to give up too. Your story gave me hope. That night, I realized something. My struggles weren't just for me. Jehovah was using them to help others who were silently breaking. But just when I thought I had it all together, life hit me again. One night, my husband confessed something that shattered me. He had been secretly drinking to numb his stress. It felt like betrayal, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I cried all over again, asking Jehovah why, after everything, another blow had to come. For a moment, I felt that old heaviness, that familiar temptation to give up. But this time was different. Instead of lying on the floor in despair, I dropped to my knees in prayer. Jehovah, I do not understand this. But I trust you. Help me help him. Help me stand. And Jehovah did. The very strength I had gained through my struggles became the strength I used to support my husband. We sought help together. We prayed together. And slowly, our marriage, though still imperfect, began to heal in ways I never thought possible. Looking back now, I see a woman I barely recognize. I see the fragile girl who once begged Jehovah to make the pain stop, and I see the woman who now thanks him for every battle, because each one made her stronger. I see the wife who once resented her husband for not meeting her needs, and I see the partner who now prays for him, stands beside him, and fights for their marriage with Jehovah's guidance. I see the believer who once doubted Jehovah's presence, and I see the daughter who now knows his hand has been holding her all along. My struggles did not vanish. But instead of breaking me, they built me. Instead of silencing me, they gave me a voice. Instead of leaving me hopeless, they taught me to hope in the only one who never fails. That is why I can now say with conviction, the struggle I endured made me unstoppable. Maybe you are where I was, on the floor, broken, feeling like Jehovah is far away. Maybe your marriage feels loveless, your finances are drowning you, your health is failing, or grief is tearing at your heart. But hear me clearly, Jehovah has not abandoned you. The very storm you are in may be the one that strengthens your faith, shapes your endurance, and prepares you to encourage others. Do not mistake your struggle for punishment. See it as training. Do not confuse your weakness with failure. It is the very place where Jehovah's strength can shine through you. So rise. Wipe your tears. Whisper his name. Because the God who carried me through my darkest nights is ready to carry you too.